And we are live. I'm just going to give people an opportunity to walk into the room, the online room, and just join us. I'll just give it a few
Sounds
minutes
good.
before we start our conversation. Yeah, I have my water, sis, right next to me.
The good thinking on your side. I should have gotten myself organized.
My throat dries up quite quickly, so I always need a glass of water next to me.
Aha, okay. All
Mm,
right.
this should be good. Hello, hello. Whoever's joining us, please just pop us a message. I see Lindell has just joined us. If you can just pop us a message on the comments box and just say hello, Dumelang, Sanbonani, or greet in any global language is welcome. Any global language is welcome in this
Come in
platform.
with your Spanish and your French.
Thank you.
Let's make it global.
Let's make it global.
Let's make it global.
is welcome. So we look forward to all the people who are just joining us. Look forward to this conversation. I was typing something. I don't know what I was typing. Ooh. All right. I think we can kickstart, and the other people will just find us on the way because I think it's the conversation for tonight. I want to make sure in the time that we have, the hour that we have, we do absolute justice to that hour. So. Good evening, everybody, from wherever you're joining us. Dumelang, Sanbonani. How do they greet in French? Bonjour.
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 Yeah.
I think in somewhere in Nigeria they say alpha. No, but I think that's colloquial. I stand to be corrected.
Nice.
Uh, I wish I knew more greetings that represent the continent, but I will. My name is Bongeka. Mhlongo, for those who may be joining us who are new to the Pin the Vision platform. So as I said, my name is Bongeka Mhlongo. I'm the founder of Pin the Vision. And Pin the Vision is really a content creation organization that is seeks to create content around encouraging people to live a life of purpose. I always say that the clarity of my purpose changed my life, and my purpose is not a luxury, but it's become a necessity for me. So, I think I'm deeply passionate about being able to spread the purpose gospel, to encourage our generation to pursue a life of deep meaning. So that's really what Pin the Vision does. But today, I wear a different hat. I'm actually the author of this book. It's titled Thinking in Full Color, which is really the foundation or what inspires the conversation tonight. So this is our fifth installment of what we have termed the Full Color Leader series. And in today's conversation, I can't believe that I actually get to be in conversation with a woman as incredible as Namhla Mniki. We have termed the topic Unpacking the Women Economic Assembly. But I think I mentioned to Sis Namhla before we went live with the public, Uguti, how I envision this conversation, it's probably going to be way more than just us talking about our economic participation and our economic inclusion. But Usis Namhla is truly one of the most incredible humans I've ever met. And I want her to just share with us her heart. She's like, her heart around, what really God has placed in her spirit. And I mean, I'll mention the first time I think, sis, I saw you. It was in the Salt and Light tribe. I think you were sharing a message. Even that message had such a fresh perspective. You're sharing a scripture that I'd never heard anybody explain it that way about kingdom principles. And when I Googled you, obsessed, and I found that, wait, she works in the private office of the president. And then I watched YouTube videos of you speaking at the United Nations and, World Economic Forum. I was blown away. And I think for me, as a young woman looking up to you as an older sister, you gave me this great sense of comfort that you can love God and be on fire for God and still be a thinker and still be technically excellent in the world and still be one of the best called upon people in your field. You gave me that vision, and that is why I think when we Nosi and I were talking about the Full Color Leader Series and the kind of people we want to bring here, it's this kind of people. And I'm blown away, even without trying to talk too much, because I can't wait for people to actually hear what you have to say. When scripture says that it is your gift that really brings you before great men and great women, for me today is a true proof of that. So without any further ado, I'm sure people are like, Bongs, we just want to get to system. Says, I always like people to, I guess, in the beginning, to just land in the room and just, who is Usis Namhla? Like, in your own words, who are you? Whether you want to share that in terms of where is home, how did you grow up, who is Sis Namhla? Like, but I just want, before we get into the crux of our conversation, for you to just open up by sharing who are you with us.
Well, thank you so much, Wongs, and it's such a generous introduction, which I think is so complimentary, and I appreciate you going into that detail in introducing me. It's a delight for me to be here. And one of the threads I hope are going to run through our conversation is what I'm about to say to you now, that it is so amazing. And when I use the word delight, I'm not making a mistake. It's very well chosen, because in scripture there are moments where Abba himself, God, says, I'm delighted with you. I delight in you. And so when I express that word, I am expressing his heart, that one of the expressions of God towards women, and particularly young women, is delight. It's delight. It's like he takes pleasure in us. And so if you go and study any woman that walked with God, and I'm going to introduce myself just now, but I'm going to take this track for a little bit. Any woman who walked with God, right? Like, so whether it was Mary, who gets told just before her purpose is explained to her, she gets told, you are the favored one. And so immediately she gets a new identity and a new name, and she gets to transform her own perspective and her posture to life, because she was ordinary Mary who was just about to be married to a favored daughter. And that changes everything to the extent that it activates her so much that when she hears, I'm about to give birth to the one who is to be king, she is not panicked by it, because a new identity and a new name came. Another story I like to talk about that people don't talk enough about is the story of Sarah, who is so delightfully protected by God that even kings can't get close to her at any point. Yeah. And people like to make it as if it was Abraham and Abraham's anointing that was the reason why Sarah was protected. but actually it was Sarah and her own relationship
Oh,
and her value to God that
wow.
made God send angels to defend her in front of kings, because Abraham had already messed up by saying she was only just a sister. And the reason why Abraham goes into mourning for such a long period of time is the value that Sarah brought to his life.
Mm.
So I say that as an opening, as a way of saying, if there's a young woman that's listening, as you are listening, one of the postures you must take to life, I am the delight of my Father. And
Wow.
when you know you are the delight of your Father, I think you get to the point where you actually realize there's nothing to prove, there's nothing to fight for, there's nothing to battle for. And that's a weird thing to kind of get your mind around, because I, as Namhla, was born in South Africa, in apartheid South Africa, 47 years ago. And at the time, a woman, particularly a Black African woman, was really just at the bottom of the rung. I remember living in and growing up in a Bantustan, right? That my
Mhm.
identity was so weak and poor that the very first encounters I remember encountering people who were different from me, whether it was a white male or whether it was someone from overseas, I would be so terrified that my voice would shake as I'm saying, hi, my name is Namhla. And so I grew up in a context where really I didn't really have much of a sense of what my actual value is. It didn't help that I grew up in an environment that was quite patriarchal and quite religious. And so there wasn't particular focus on who women are. But one of the unique things, and I've got to say this before we go too far, one of the unique things, even in that context, was that I always understood that I was close to God. I always understood that I had a straight line to heaven. I always understood that I could speak inside my heart and that there was someone hearing and receiving and speaking to me. And so anyone that is trying to figure out and find their place in their world, like I was back in those days,
Yeah.
one of the things you must learn is to go inside, because both
Mhm.
eternity and God dwell in the inside. And when I
Yeah.
say inside, I don't mean your emotions, I mean your essence, like the very, very core of who you are. So essentially, that's my background. But then I have been redeemed and I have learned through many, many life experiences how to combine the fact that I have been sent by a God who is supreme to
Mm.
come into this world and perform particular functions and a
Mm.
particular mandate. Combine that with every other skill that I have amassed in this world so that I can be effective as I live my world. But that sounds quite heavy, because it sounds like all I'm about is work. But because I
Mhm.
understood the idea of delight, I also find that I'm able to live that life of effectiveness and impact while really being delighted myself with my life, while finding ways of ensuring that that life as I raise my two boys is balanced, and that I establish excellent relationships like the one that we have and the ones that I have with other people that I associate with. And so I am a lover of life in that way. I am a lover of love. I am all about love. And I think the essence of my power emerges out of the fact that love really is the most powerful, most transformational, most impactful weapon and tool that we can use to change the world. But I am an avid activist and I am an avid Pan Africanist. And so I am a complete believer that
Yeah.
it is this continent that's going to transform the world. And
Wow.
on top of that, that it's young people that are going to transform it and the world. And on top of that, that it is women at the very forefront of that battle. And we can break that down a little bit.
Yeah. Wow. Um, Thank you, sis, for that incredible ushering. And as you were talking, I was actually reminded of a story that I shared in my book about my first encounter with God, really.
Right.
And I talk about it, the story in the book that, I think as a teenager, um, though you and especially you grew up, you I think sometimes people think when you grew up in church, you automatically just know God, right? But it's not you are close to the God conversation, but knowing God is that dimension of the essence of your identity. And one of the
Absolutely.
first things that I always say, and I share it in the book, the first thing that God said to me was, I've called you to
Yeah.
impact your generation. So
Yeah.
that is already a forming of identity. It was a forming of identity for me. But what is always, I guess, what I've always grappled with, and I'm sure you can relate with this, is a duality of existence. So you have the God experience, the inner God experience, where you are so clear. God has called you. You have this incredible relationship with God. You have ideas like that God gives you. But then you exist in a culture, whether it's like Zulu or Xhosa, that's very patriarchal, that is like, no, girls must do this, girls must do that.
Yeah.
Even at church, women must not dress like this. Women, it's almost this massive control of you showing up fully in the full essence of who you are as a woman. And I guess, sis, I want to start the conversation around, um, if we are to live with this conviction and confidently go into the world that we are God's delight, as as um as women, what are some of the tools that, I mean, I talked about how you show up, which is just like incredible, your presence. So where do we begin, to to cultivate this sense of clarity and this sense of sureness, so that we don't compromise ourselves as women, and we we are like, we're just so clear about our God identity, because again, it's this conversation is about women, and we're about to close Women's Month in South Africa. But I really want to know, what is the tool? I don't know if tool is the right word, but I think you understand what I'm trying
Yeah.
to say, that
Yeah.
helps us to, man, like confidently walk in this truth of who we are.
Right. So it's such an important question. I'm gonna talk about two streams of
Mm,
knowledge sets.
mm,
And the first knowledge set is going to be easily accessible because we talk about it all the time in the leadership space, and that is finding one's purpose. If I track back to my own journey, I think actually the beginning of it was being quite intentional about figuring out what was I born for, right?
mm,
And that's a conversation and that's a thought process and a reflection that's quite accessible. But I have found, particularly in my mentoring and coaching work, that people really just don't know, how do I get to that? And the simplest and the easiest way of understanding one's purpose is, what is it that your heart is drawn for? What is the calling of your inside? What is the one thing that your heart is constantly gravitating towards? And so in my teenage life already, I knew that I had a real deep desire to help people. I knew that I
mm,
hated poverty. And the fact that I would eventually become a policy expert at a global level came with time, but the essence of it was always there, that, you
yeah.
know what, I will not live in a world that has poverty, and that
Wow.
I'm always going to be at the center of finding solutions to that. And
Mm,
so once you kind of give yourself permission, and I want to say this, and I'm going to say this prophetically as well, that one of the things that we must learn as women is to allow ourselves, to give ourselves permission.
mm,
So you must give yourself permission to ask yourself that question. What do I desire? What are the deep desires of my heart? What is the thing that I long to do? What is the problem I long to solve in
mm,
my world? As soon as you allow yourself to go down that road, a couple of things happen. One of them is that you discover that you have purpose, because you are going to start doing the thing that is in your heart, and then you are going to have the world begin to respond to you as a valuable human being in the world. So
mm,
people will start saying, oh my goodness, you helped me so much. Because when you begin to do that which you were born to do, the world can't help but to respond positively to that. And what that does is that it begins to build you up to realize, I was born with a purpose. Once you realize that you were born with a purpose, then your sense of value of self is no longer the sentences that you are just throwing at yourself in front of a mirror and you don't believe. It's that you now have evidence of the things you have been doing. You've seen the results, and the life itself is ministering back to you and saying you are a valuable human being. And you can't separate that from what God tells us about who we are. And that's the second stream I wanted to talk about. But because we are talking about just how do we get started, I think it's so important to ask the question, what is my purpose? What is my value? And to begin to move towards that. So break whatever barrier inside, whatever insecurity, whatever negative self-talk, whatever it is that's inside that would be stopping you from walking the journey of purpose. I would say the very first thing is to fight and destroy that thing as quickly as you can. Then the second stream, and you know that I'm a Bible person, I'm a kingdom person, I'm the very son of God and the heir of the kingdom. And so a lot of my identity has come from understanding what scripture says about who I am. And what scripture says about who I am, beyond the fact that I'm a delight of God, is that I was created in his image, which means that everything that he is, I am. Everything that he can think, I can. Everything he can do, I can. Every power that he has given me access to it. So embodying that, receiving that, and welcoming that into your life, I think allows you to move beyond self-definition to I am going to go with what the creator of all things says. And when you align with that, I think there are certain things about who you are, internal insecurities that immediately fall away. Because if you believe in God and you believe in the supremacy of his wisdom, then you know that your opinion, your feelings, what they said about you when you were born, what they said about you when they were swearing at you, really doesn't matter in the context of the creator of the universe says, I am the favored one. Here are a couple of nuggets. Maybe I'll mention one or two. A couple of nuggets from the line of what scripture says about us. It says, for when God creates, he is not able to usher in anything on earth, in this realm, in this reality we live in, without a woman. So when I talk about women being usherers of new realities, it's not like a nice to say. It's not like a thing that's like a nice feeling. It's an actual fact that even when the Christ had to be born, God the Father had to say, I don't need the seed of a man, but I cannot do this without a woman. And there was a spiritual principle to that, that women themselves have been given the part of God identity that is an usherer of new realities. I must emphasize this because we're going to talk about the economy. And if women don't understand today that they are usherers of new realities, they are not going to get what time it is, that we are at the cusp of transformation in the African context, even in the South African context. We could go left or right, and left would be the death of everything, and right would be the resurrection of life, the restoration of our economy, restoration of our communities. When women don't understand that they are usherers of new realities, what they do is they fall back and they wait for the men to lead. When women understand that they are the usherers of new realities, they align with God's heart and they go and they listen in the bosom of the Father. Father, what are you up to right now? I am up to restoring South Africa. That's what the Father responds. And then you begin to push yourself, propel yourself forward as a woman, because you understand that if you don't go to the fore of this revolution, the new reality that must come for this nation will not come. So it's not that you are being prideful when you say, I'm going to dig deep and do the things that are in my heart that I know God wants me to do. It's because you understand what time it is and what season it is and what is at stake. That unless women propel themselves, go forward, regardless of what's standing in their way, then there are consequences for generations to come about what it is we can do as this nation and what we can't do as this nation. So we are a big deal as far as heaven is concerned. And I think it is really time that we begin to align with that agenda. Let me say one thing before I let you come in again. And sorry, I know I'm talking too long, but
no. It's okay.
So
it's okay.
I was And actually, I just lost my thought. I'm sure it's gonna come back, but there's something that I wanted to add in this understanding, in this. I was gonna mention that we really just have to understand it isn't an issue of pride. When you think about who created you, your understanding of your identity must be at the level of your creator.
Yeah.
Let me explain what that means. You can't be under the impression, basically, when you are under the impression that you are less than, what you are saying is that God, you created a doormat. God, you created a victim. Anything you say about yourself, you are basically saying to the God who created you, that is the level and the standard of what you are able to create. So my daily bread to myself, my daily message to myself is, I must show up at the level of God.
Wow.
And that's a high stake. But it's sad because I have a clear understanding of who created me. And I know he can't create less than himself. It would make no sense. When I raise my children, I'm raising them at my level because they must show that they are my children. If they are at a level that is less than me, it means that something is missing. So we can't have a God who goes out of his way to create at a level that is less than him. It makes no sense. Which means everywhere I show up as the image of God.
Yeah.
I stop there. Sorry.
No, sis, please, no apologies. This is
Now, I do want us to have a conversation, and I don't want to go to the preachy side, but you can see this is a topic that I'm really passionate about.
Which is why you're here. Wow. There's so many things that are coming at me, but I'm trying to restructure my thoughts because otherwise we're not going to sleep. But what you're saying literally is so powerful because and this is why I love you so much, sis, because we are so aligned. We're of the same spirit, right? Because as you're talking, because maybe I'm like a child in my mind, and I'm like this curious person, but who also deeply cares about our society. I'm thinking about how we have often again, and maybe it's the socialization of religion, made it seem as if God is only God when you are at church. And for me, the relationship I've always had, which goes back to that thing that you mentioned in the beginning around, getting to know God for yourself as a woman, to understand what is God's heart as we prepare for this continent. I mean, for the things. Anyone who knows me, whether my family or my friends, I've always kind of been saying things like, I've called to impact this continent. God cares about this continent. I need to contribute to this continent. It's not and I'm so glad we're having this conversation in this platform, because I think sometimes people think, no, when you can't mix God and conversations about the economy, and conversations about policy, and conversations about economic development and creativity, whereas the birthing of everything that we are, these books, the fact that we even hear this book is an idea from God. The fact that you are sitting in the highest office in this country, coming with ideas that are birthed in your private time with God to impact policy in this country. I just think it's such a profound thing that I want people, even who are joining us, to be able to walk away, that I think there is a new generation that's arising, that God is wanting us to be placed strategically in all facets of society. And my thing that I always say, which is the ministry God gave me, God is a thinker.
Yeah.
God is an idea generator. And that is a facet of God that we have to be able to bring to the fore in the spaces that we come into. And that level of clarity can only come through intimacy in your own private time. It will never come in a public space, so like, as I hear you speak, I know that this level of conviction, even the way you operate this and the way you show up, that is it comes because of the level of intimacy and the level of relationship that you formed with God. So as we usher into, obviously, around the conversation around the economy. And I love what you said, that, you know, women are the ashes of a new reality. And Saturday, and I won't go into detail, we were at a conference with Usis Namhla. Those who were not there, you just missed out. You know, and there's a statement you made, I think it made the whole room go crazy, around, we have, as women, we have always been the ones who are responsible to bring to an end an era and to usher into a new era. Now, you are obviously at the forefront of, in South Africa, of the Women Economic Assembly.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have this conversation, sis, around, we talk a lot, I think, in South Africa, in Africa, about economic emancipation, economic participation, and it's these big terms, right?
Yeah.
And I guess for me, again, being like, because I like to think of things also quite simply. Whenever I think of economic participation, I always think about parents investing in a girl child and saying to you, we need to take you to school so that you can empower yourself and stand on your own 2 feet, and be able to provide for yourself. Because it starts there. Like, when a woman is capacitated through education and tools, she, number one, it diminishes the chances of you finding yourself in
Right.
relationships where you can be abused, because you are able to stand in your own 2 feet. So, sis, in the most simplistic way, if you had to talk about the vision around what is the Women Economic Assembly, what is it seeking to do in our country, and why is it so important for you, this kind of work? Why is it so important for you?
Yeah. Well, let me start here, and I thank you so much for that question. So God has a vision for our economy, right? He has a vision for success and development in our country, and that vision has justice and inclusion at the middle of it. In other words, what is just is a world where every single person is able to live with dignity, where every single person is able to make an income and reproduce and produce in such a way that they are able to take care of themselves and their families. So that's the basics of an economy, but also that's a God standard. So when we
Mm,
look at our economy and we assess it according to those standards, we know that it fails at various levels. At the moment, we've got an unemployment rate that is about 45.5% broadly. But if you look at young people between the ages of 18 and 25, we are looking at 63% who are unemployed, and more young women are unemployed than young men. If you look at how the business space is organized, we know that most of our economy is owned by people who are outside of South Africa. So the big companies that operate in South Africa are German companies,
mm,
French companies, American companies, Canadian companies. So even when you are talking about the possibility of owning our economy, who produces, who sells, and who
yeah.
decides what's sold, it is not South Africans. So I'm giving that as a background to just give a sense of the depth of, number one, how distorted our economy is, but number two, the complexity of why we need full color thinkers to come in and begin to solve the problems. So when you have a government and civil society and people who are standing and they are saying, how do we begin to fix this? One of the possibilities of fixing that is to say, how do we ensure that we begin to produce things here in South Africa and get women and young people producing those products and services and then selling them in South Africa? And that's what we call the value chain of industry, right? So if I go to the agro processing space, I know that there are apples that are sold to Europe, but I also know that I could turn those apples into juice and
Yes.
other byproducts and understand that value chain and ensure that women are operating in that value value chain. If I look at cotton, this is the example I made on Saturday, that if I look at cotton, and we've got women who produce cotton in this country, but cotton is what I'm wearing. And
Yes.
so they produce it in that fluffy substance, and then they have to sell it so that it's processed somewhere, and then they buy clothes at Edgar's or whatever the case is. So when we're saying, let's begin to transform the economy, it's not just high level statements we're making. We've got to go inside the economy and say, what is wrong with this economy? And we know that what's wrong with our economy is that it's not producing jobs. We don't produce enough goods and services that are bought and sold in South Africa. And we don't have access to the opportunity to do that. So the Women Economic Assembly then exists to say, if you're a woman and you're in business, you are producing something, whether it's a good or a service, our job is to go into that industry that's blocking you from operating, so that we can put in place the policy mechanisms and the practice to ensure that you are actually operating in that space. So if I start a hairline, a product line for hair products, right? And I say, as a woman in South Africa, okay, I have this amazing product. It will keep your hair lovely and soft, and it will grow your natural hair. The very first thing that I would want to do is to ensure that I can sell that product at Clicks or at Spar or at Pick n Pay. What you are going to face when you go to Spar, Clicks, and Pick n Pay is that all three of them are going to tell you, we have buyers who decide what comes into our shelves. Those buyers are committed to people who look like them, sound like them, because most buyers are male, most buyers are white. And so they will not give you the time of day until something like the Women Economic Assembly comes in and says to Spar or Pick n Pay, how much of your products in these shelves come from women in South Africa? And as soon as you say that, coming from the office of the president, coming from business, there's pressure that is exerted on Pick n Pay to begin to change their own practice about where they are buying products. So now we've got companies who were not even thinking about women 3 years ago, who have now begun to say, okay, we have to localize and we've got to bring women in as suppliers. So they are increasingly starting to buy products and services from women. Now, so it sounds quite technical, but let me kind of like simplify it a little bit by saying, when we are having full color conversations and we are having conversations about what it's going to take to transform this country and lead it out of the dark place it's in now into a better place, each of us have to find that area of value where we have to operate. Each of us, I'm an economist, so I can go into the economic space and say, these are the policies that must change. This is the pressure we need in the private sector. This is the pressure we need in the public sector. Someone else might be a doctor, and they might be looking at their own space and saying, there isn't enough access of quality healthcare services to poor people. And so you might be wanting to come in with a solution particularly curated to solve that particular problem. It's not the supremacy of the area where you are operating. It's the value that you are bringing in that space to transform that space so that justice prevails, so that fairness prevails, so that people of this country are taken care of. And in the end, the composite impact of that is the revolution we are looking for, because we are looking for a world that operates in a different way. How does this connect to your faith? It connects to my faith because the only thing that gives me the boldness to sit in front of advisors of the president and say, this is not going to work, this is going to work, is because I know who sent me in that space. I know who backs my ideas up. I know where I have validated them, so I can carry the power that Christ promises me. Is not power for the pulpit. It's power to change this economy, because I've been given the economy to change. But for someone else, it might be power to transform the education system. For someone else, it might be power to transform the way we think, like you are doing now, or to transform the coaching space, so whatever the case is. But every single one of us have that responsibility to say, how do I amass everything I am and bring it to bear in the places that I must transform and I must change? So going back to the Women Economic Assembly, it is a mandate of the president. So the president launched it last year, but we are working with women in business. And so it's a private-public partnership where literally women in business in South Africa have come together and said, let's figure out how to solve this problem. And the
Beautiful.
composite pressure that we bring into industry has caused the possibility that our economy might change, so just simply because we decided we'll work together and figure this out. So every single business association is part of the movement. We've got women entrepreneurs from 17 different sectors that are working in the Women Economic Assembly. And as a collective, we go to CEOs and we say, listen, this is what we're asking for. This is what you're doing good, but this is what you're not doing great. And this is what we are asking you to change. And that is the business of transforming the nation.
Wow. And sis, in terms of if somebody wanted to, if maybe there's because there are people who may not know about it, because I only got to know about it because I follow you. That's how really I got to know about the Women Economic Assembly, and I watched I watched the whole live streaming when it was launched. But in terms of like somebody hearing this for the first time, maybe there's a business, an entrepreneur, a woman entrepreneur, and they want to be involved or participate somehow. How would one be part of it and get access to participate as well?
Right. So number one, if you're a woman operating in South Africa and you are in a business sector, we would love to have you join us. That is number one. It doesn't matter what sector you are in, because you will find other women in your sector who are part of the assembly. We've got a website, which is wecona.org. So people can go into that website. And one of the things that's exciting coming up is that we will be hosting with the president again this October, the
Yes.
5th and the 6th, the annual WeCorner event. So when you go to that website, it's going to allow you to actually register for that event, whether you want to come in person or not. But I think that what I would really encourage is for you to use the email address in the website to basically say, I'd like to be part of WeCorner. And then we'll just invite you to our meetings and we meet on a weekly basis. So it's as simple as that. Open platform. Women, by the way, lead differently. There's no
Yes.
hierarchy. There's
Yeah.
no ego. At least we're trying to destroy those things that we learned from this this current system. So what we try and do is we try and understand what your value is, and then we basically you can play in any of the spaces that we've got to either lead or to support some of the things that we're doing.
Okay. And sis, I'm curious around, I mean, if there is a relationship in terms of the work that you guys are doing as an assembly, and if somehow there's an impact or it's trickling down in the education sector in some way, because I'm always fascinated by the conversation around, we have so many graduates in this country, X number of graduates, but they're unemployed. And I know even one of the essays in the book, I talk about, guys, what forum is there, like a proper solid forum that is having a conversation between the enterprise or business sector and the education sector? Because you can't be telling me there's thousands and thousands of graduates and they're produced, but then you're telling me the graduates are not meeting the skills that are required in the new world of work. Then I'm curious around who's facilitating, to make sure that what we are being trained on in the different education sectors is actually going to contribute to the economy. Is there, I don't know, as part of a forum, or is there someone who sits in the president's office? Is there thinking around how do we marry, or maybe marries, but how do we prepare or
I hear you.
this issue around education and a mismatch around graduates and what is required by the economy?
So what an important question. I mean, I'll answer that in a couple of ways. Number one is that the mismatch is real in South Africa. It's even more real when you try and project into 5 years, 10 years to think about who we are producing now, but also what skills are we needing are we needing into the future? We have a team of women within Wikona who are ICT specialists, and they've started talking about robotics, and they go around the country teaching young girls, as an example, how to code. At
Yeah.
least two of the women in our team actually own companies that go around South Africa
Brilliant.
teaching young girls robotics and coding and so on. So these are conversations that are at the core, I think, of what we're trying to do. When we went into the automotive industry, one of the things that the ladies told us was, no one trains you in automotives. Automotives basically means you own a car dealership, or you are a manager of a car dealership, like so, or you are in sales. And then they were like, you've got to know a car inside out to be able to operate in that industry. But
Yes.
nobody teaches you that. And so one of the things we started to do was to engage with one of us, of the associations, NAMSA. And next year, they are going to be launching a degree in automotives and at
Wow.
NMU. So these are like real tangible things that we're doing, but we're doing them from the side of industry. In other words, we're coming from this side and we're saying, okay,
Yeah.
what is the skills gap? And I promise you, in every single industry, there is a skills gap. And
Absolutely.
then we're trying to come up with innovative programs together with the industries themselves of how we can close that skills gap. I think one of the things I'm thinking about as you are talking, as you are asking that question, was we also need to approach it from the education side, so that
Yes.
even at curriculum level, those changes are beginning to take place at primary level, at secondary, and at high school level. And that's not where we've gotten to as Wikona specifically. But I do know that within the public sector, there are entities that have been thinking about this question of the curriculum for the longest time. In fact, the teams that are working on the unemployment problem are actually focusing in part on how do we ensure that young people that are exiting the education system are employable. I would say, though, Bongs, we actually need more ordinary citizens in those conversations more than your public sector. We need
Yeah.
more innovators. We need more people on the ground, engineers who are going to come and say, I now know what I know, but I would like a 5-year-old to learn the following. I'd like
Yeah.
a 7-year-old to learn the following. I think we have to be that radical and intentional about the changes we need to see in this country, because the public sector isn't the salvation we've been waiting for. We are, like, as in people who have the expertise, who are working in those spaces, we are the ones that are to change those spaces.
Wow. I'm cognizant of time. There's a thought I want to share. I know we have 10 minutes. So, guys, I know in the beginning I forgot to say, if there's any questions, please, you can start popping them now. We will take them shortly for Sis Namhla. But yeah, if you have any questions or comment, send us the question. Sis, just in terms of, as you spoke about the example of the automotive industry and the automobile, something came into my spirit. And this is something I think I've said to some of my friends and my siblings. Maybe they would have heard me say this. Uguti, I think how our education system has been structured. Maybe it's also a socialization thing. I don't know how in other countries it is. But what I find is most of us are end product dreamers. So what I mean is most of us will say, I want to own a car, or I want to own a catering business, or I want to own a restaurant. But we have not been trained to be value chain thinkers. So if, for example, at school we were taken to a factory that makes a car, imagine the child, you would be able to expand your mind to say, hey, maybe I could be the person that supplies. All cars have screws. We never think about that. You just think, I'm just going to order the car. Maybe I'm the person that's going to supply the rubber. Who supplies
Yeah.
the rubber?
Yeah.
There are countries whose education is value chain thinking, where it's not just the
Absolutely.
product, but you have to be able to see the whole thing and know that, because I really think there is more than enough of the economy part. I don't know whether it's me, maybe I'm not obviously an expert in economy and you're the expert, but I really think there's more than enough. It's maybe the way we have been taught to frame things. We end products, we all want to sit in an office, but there's so much. Like, I even think about the people who supply. I look at the window, I'm like, there's that glue thing. Who supplies that? you know,
It came from somewhere.
it came from somewhere. We
Yeah.
want to be talking about, hey, the land must come back. The land must come back. But like, are we thinking about what raw materials can we, even the space? There are people who are now, there's conversations around how can we go into space and extract material from space that can help address the water crisis in on planet Earth, that can help address the electricity crisis. Why are we not being taught all of these things? So I think
Yeah.
maybe, it's just yeah, sorry, I think there's a thought you want to share around as I'm
No,
going
no,
on.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think there is so much opportunity in the sector. I mean, depending on who you are, we've got government recognizes 17 sectors, 17
Mhm.
industries in South Africa, but other experts would say 24. But inside each of those sectors, there could be as much as 50 subsectors underneath, like as in the value chain opportunities that you
Yeah.
just highlighted. But listen, here's the major problem for me is that
Mm.
to be able to think the way you are thinking and the way you are seeing it, you would have to have an education system that
Mm.
not only teaches you how to write and spell and count, but also
Mm.
how to think.
Mm.
So
Mm.
our education system right now is about memorize and remember, because I'm gonna punish
Mm.
you if you don't remember when I
Yes.
test you. It
Yes.
doesn't teach you on how to problem solve. It doesn't teach you how to analyze things, how to see possibilities, even how to dream. In fact, the nature of the education system is to stop you from dreaming, right? And dreaming is one of the most inspiring things that humans do. So people who are excelling in their spaces, I myself actually coding off time to dream, to think about possibilities. And I use instruments in my own life that allow for me to be
Mm.
creative.
Mm.
And the reason why I say for South Africans, we have to claim this country back
Yeah.
is that so much damage has happened in the last couple of decades that there is, like, literally we have to fix everything, including teaching our children how to think, how to dream, how to analyze, how to problem solve, so that we can begin to see these opportunities. And then we need to have people, so we'll have those people who are brilliant educators, and then we need to have people who are going to be the game changers, the trailblazers
Mm.
that will go into an industry and say, I see an opportunity here. I'm going to pursue this opportunity so that others who are coming behind me can see that it's possible. And we need to see a lot more of those types of people as well.
Mm. Wow. I'm at how to dream. Like I'm at how to dream. No, it's just because like I think that is such a profound thought. No, see, I don't know, in the background, somehow when we capture the reflection tomorrow, hashtag how to dream has to be there. I'm even thinking about, even in corporate, in corporate space, we don't have enough time to think.
Yeah,
You get told you are employed 8 hours a day. And in those 8 hours, and this is something I had with a colleague of mine earlier, that just because I'm not giving you a deliverable that's looking like a document or a report or presentation, or a survey in this, it does not mean I'm not being effective. And we
yeah.
don't value thinking time, dreaming time. And think about it, sis. I'm sure anyone here who's joined us who's had great ideas come to them. Ideas come when you are not, when you're busy and you're stressed. I mean, I don't know, maybe
You are
ideas don't.
least effective when you're like that, yes.
But yet, yeah, and this is why I love this conversation so much, sis, and there's so much more. Obviously, I know we don't have time. It's probably we need to have a second segment at a later um, point. But it's almost saying that, and something you even said on Saturday at the SA Women Commission, and the whole room went crazy. That if we are still thinking that the current in the current tools that we use are going to liberate us, and now if we're just saying, oh, we need more jobs, then we are far from rescuing our country. We need a new kind of
Absolutely.
thinking, a new kind of economic system, even
Yeah.
because we're still all of us operating and thinking capitalism, you know. And when you said that, I was like, I love
It
this.
hasn't worked. I mean,
Because
the numbers themselves are so clear. Like, we've got an unemployment problem of 8 to 11 million. We can only create 1 million jobs per annum. It'll take, if we're lucky, it'll take us decades to close that gap, unless someone is a full color thinker and they come in and they say, listen, let's
yes.
do it differently. So one of my passions is to say, I really don't understand why in my village, in my little village where I come from in the Eastern Cape in
Mm,
Aidugwa, where there isn't an economic hub there, where we
sure.
know that the people of Aidugwa specialize in macadamia nuts. That's what they do. So
Wow.
macadamia oil comes from there. The nuts come from there. If you want chocolate that has macadamia nuts, you go to Aidugwa because that's the specialists. They do this in Europe all the time, where you've got villages that specialize in particular
Yes.
types of cheeses, in particular types of pastas. It's
Right.
lack of ability to think when we say people must wait for grants instead of go to a village, figure out
Mm,
what skill people could learn, figure out what
mm,
industry could be in that hub, and then
mm,
begin to decentralize the economy so that you don't have a
yes.
handful of giants that are controlling the economy with no one else who has access to it.
Mm,
So I mean, there's so much work to do, but you know what? I do think that we can do it. And I know we're running out of time. The thing I wanted to end off maybe with like one or two thoughts, particularly for the ladies. And
yes.
with your permission, is it okay if I can just
Of
summarize
course.
one or two things?
Yes, sis.
See,
Yeah.
ladies, my thought, my hope is that you're not getting overwhelmed with the conversation we're having, because
Mm,
the type of person that you are naturally created to be is the type of leader that's needed today. So
mm,
we're talking about full color thinking. We're talking about the ability to think outside the noise. And one of the things that women do well is to incubate ideas, because we are incubators. The ability to close off the world and say, no phone calls, no meetings. I need time to incubate this idea that's brewing inside me, so that by the time it gets to its fullness and you are presenting it to the board, to the management team, to your boss, you've incubated an idea that can come to life in
mm,
your work environment. And when I say your work environment, I'm not talking about fancy exclusively. I'm talking about anywhere you are. Where there is a problem and where there is a woman, a solution is there.
mm,
I'm not playing when I say this, that you are born with the ability to recognize, identify a problem, and then begin to brew inside you the solution to that problem. But the tip is to create time intentionally to be able to do that. So you must have a my dreaming space. And you have to be able to block off the world when you know you are getting into your dreaming zone. I promise you, if you were to just exercise this one little thing, the stress of your life would change dramatically from a pressurized employee to
mm,
someone who is able to offer value, because you're not running from one meeting to another or answering one call and another, but rather you are saying, I have time for phone calls, but now it's my
mm.
dreaming space because I'm
Yes.
solving something, I'm birthing something. I have a
Wow.
responsibility to bring something in. And then the last thing I'll say, which you excel in as a woman, is the ability to bring thoughts together from varying parties, right? So
Mm,
we live in a world where all spaces are conflicted. Whether you are at work, someone is fighting with someone. Whether you are at church, someone is fighting with someone. But people are so ego focused that everywhere we look, the environment is full of conflict.
mm,
Women have the unique ability to almost under the radar be able to pull forces together and hold them together. Whether you are called the CEO or not, it doesn't matter. It's not about your title, but it's about the ability to hone into what you are best at and
mm,
begin to use those things that you excel in to provide value. So for too long, we've been told that we must look like the men, sound like the men, behave like the men in order to be effective. but I actually am effective, and I will never sound like a man. I will never look like a man. I will never even desire to sound and look and act like a man, because my intuition and my sensibility moves in such a way that I'm a confusion in an environment of destruction. I'm a confusion that allows for light to come in. So while you are still waiting to watch what is Namhla's agenda, what is her ego, is she trying to get a promotion, you will not understand that my job is to just find the best solution and solve the problems you are facing. And if I could say any one thing here, I would just simply say, lean into what you were created to be. Because this world right now needs that which women are everywhere: workplace, community, society, churches, policy space, it doesn't matter. We need the essence of woman, essence of Ashera, of new realities, essence of nurturer, essence of leader by collaboration. That is what our world needs right now. You can't be shaking your head. I'm done.
I'm taking in. I'm taking in. I'm like,
I'm so glad.
wow. I think there are things that I said, and people jump on chairs and sometimes they forget, and there are things that I said and that hit your soul, and you're like, you're speechless. So
Yeah.
I think there's nothing more. I just feel like this conversation went by so quick. This hour was not
It
enough.
went by just like that. Hey.
Just like that. But my sis, I know that I know questions. I've been checking. No, see checked. I think people, again, because you have that impact where when you say something, we just like,
Oh my goodness.
So ngiyabonga kakhulu for just having this conversation. I think we probably need a second part of it because there's still things that are in your heart that I would love to extract, but I don't want to miss what has been said, guys. To those who are joining us, thank you so much for taking time on a Thursday evening, and I always never take for granted when people choose to dedicate a portion of your time of their time for you. I truly appreciate it. So we're so grateful to Sis Namhla. Sis Namhla, thank you. I don't know if you have any final closing words, but from my side, I just want to say thank you just for being the woman that you are and being a light in this country, and for giving the rest of us who know we have called to impact this generation the confidence to do it in the strength and in the way that God has created. As you said, lean in to who you are. We will change the world by being fully ourselves and showing up in the way that God has intended for us to show up. So I don't know if there's any the final word, and then I literally end this broadcast and people can go and have dinner.
Right. Just to say thank you so much for having me. And as a big sis, to you and maybe many of the people that will be listening, I only leave you with blessing. Every good thing that must come your way. You are brilliant. You are what the world needs. You have been given every single thing that you need to prosper and to make an impact in this world. And you are a delight, not just to the Father, but to the world. And I just wish you, particularly with this vision of this work that you're doing with Pen the Vision, this vision of Pen the Vision, with this work, any other work, but also every single woman that's listening, every piece of work, everything you lay your hands on, may it be blessed, may it expand and explode. You are exactly what we need in this world. And as your big sisters, we really just need you to come here where we are. So please hurry and move along with it.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, good night, everybody. Be blessed. And you can get also those who haven't gotten a copy of Thinking in Full Color, it's available on our website for the South African audience, www.penthevision.co.za. And to our brothers and sisters in the continent, it's on Amazon. You can find it as an ebook, as well as paperback, as well as everybody who's outside of the continent, any part of the world, you can find Thinking in Full Color. Be blessed, everybody. Have a fantastic evening. Bye.
Bye.